to the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Sherri Stewart, and I'm here with special guest host who I stole from the Plus One Forward podcast, Rich Rogers.
Hey, Sherri.
Hey. And as well, our guest is Patrick. He's one of my favorite Gauntlet players.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, Patrick.
So each month we look back at the games played by Gauntlet folks. Rich, why don't you tell us about the games that you played in June?
Well, June was a light month for me. I spent the entire month in an apartment in downtown Minneapolis, so hangout games didn't happen as much as I would like. Off Gauntlet, I had Urban Shadows, Demigods, Changeling the Lost PBTA, and I'm going to count a little bit of July because I'm embarrassed by my list. So also The One Ring. And on Gauntlet, I had Blazon 1%er Swoop Gang, Things from the Flood, and Too Good to Be True. And then I had some games at Origins, the convention. I ran a couple sessions of Hut Cartel, Savage Worlds. I got to play in a session of Savage Worlds, and I ran the game I'm going to talk about, which is Hit the Streets, Defend the Block. Sherri talked about it a few months ago when it was under his working name of 1%er Supers. It's a street-level supers RPG that I launched on Kickstarter July 1st, so it's still active as of the time of this particular podcast episode coming out. It's a street-level supers that uses 1%er, like I talked about earlier, 1%er Swoop Gang. It's a system I'm really comfortable with. It's a die pool system where you're rolling 6-sided dice against a target number set by a GM, so it's got a very conventional feel to it. It's easy to bring people in. I kind of like to think of Hit the Streets, Defend the Block as a bridge kind of game where some of my story gamer friends can enjoy aspects of it that are a little on the soap opera emotional side, but it still has the more familiar feel of like target numbers and the GM, and like you look at your stats and you figure out what you're going to do, right? That's the marriage that I've created with it. It's not only a 1%er game, but it also has a lot of the DNA that I love from Lady Blackbird. So as you guys know from previous episodes, I am a huge, huge fan of John Harper's Lady Blackbird. So anytime that I can find a game that I can run like Lady Blackbird, I'm going to run the crap of it, which I have.
I feel like I've heard that about you before.
Kind of my claim to D-list fame? I don't know. What works for me about Hit the Streets, Defend the Block, the things I'm most proud of are the map-making system, which I stole completely from The Hood by Groundhoggeth Games. It's a PBTA game that you should totally check out, in that the group gets together at the start and we'll sit down, and if you're at a physical table, which I got to do at Origins, it's the first time I played it live, but if you're online, you can also use something like Google Drawing, and the GM will start off by drawing, okay, this is Main Street, or this is the Main Street of our neighborhood. And then you go in rounds, and once everybody's made their characters, they'll draw the line, okay, this is the street that my character lives on. What is it? Oh, it's an apartment complex, or it's a crappy house, or, even it could be I live in a tenement building or a trailer. It's the characters are street level, so you've got real jobs, and the map making is great because it helps people grow a little bit of a connection to the place that they're going to defend. So you draw where you live, then you do another round where you draw things like, where's the bar that everybody hangs out? Where do most people work? We could even talk about mass transit systems or city parks. And so you fill it out, and sure, this is not going to look like any actual neighborhood out there. It's going to be a little scant. And sometimes it's going to be a little weird because you're using Google Drawings, or someone, has a scribbly hand. But at the end, you have this either physical or digital document, like a tapestry of your play. And it's especially meaningful for me because you can update that map, right? That's things that, okay, this huge big fight happened at the water tower and it was knocked over. Well, let's draw that. You draw that on your map. It's got a little bit of that Avery Alder's Quiet Year feel to it, in that you can make physical changes. And that act in and of itself, whether it's drawing on a piece of paper or making an adjustment on a Google Drawing, it has this resonance that's so interesting, and I really enjoy it, especially over multiple sessions of play when you can see that neighborhood, expand, grow out, evolve. So I'm really happy with the map making system. And then,
I'll say, just for me personally, like I've been obsessed sort of with map drawing games recently. I think J. Iles's Legacy was the first one that I played where I really saw the possibilities of it. And I've played Hit the Streets as well. I love the neighborhood creation part of it, and you're right. There's something about that communal process, especially if you're in something like a Google drawing where everybody is going to make equally terrible looking lines and shapes on there, so you're all sort of on a level playing field. It's such a great way to chronicle and remember the high points of a story.
thanks, I agree. It's funny that my buddy Tara, she became obsessive about her neighborhood, and like in between game sessions she went back and put in like little shrubberies around a pool that she'd drawn in this little rich neighborhood. She went and like lined everything up, so when we came back we're like, wait a second, what happened
That's
here?
amazing.
It's I'll share the link with you guys. It's hilarious.
Our neighborhood didn't have money for bushes around the pool, that's for sure.
Another part of Hit the Streets, Defend the Block, which is just what I loved about One Percenter itself, is what in One Percenter, remember this is explicit, is the stat called Fox. But in Hit the Streets, Defend the Block is called Spark. And the flow of the way Spark works, in that you can use it to fuel a role that you really care about. It's the resource that you lose if you roll poorly and you're getting a beat down. And it's also a spark you can spend that resource to help out your teammates. And if you run out of spark, then you lose access to your superpowers. You've lost the spirit. It's kind of that moment in Spider-Man issue 50, I think, where he throws his costume in the trash can. Or it could be a physical thing where your character's laid up in the hospital. And the best way to get spark back is refresh scenes. Is kind of the only way. You either, if you're able, you go around and you do charity work to help out your neighborhood, or you have to fight crime, but you can't do it with your superpowers, and so you patrol the neighborhood. Or you have bonding moments with your team. You reinforce them, and they help remind you of the touchstones of why it is that you have to defend your block, and that's how you refresh and get that spark back. And I love that loop of, you have a thing you want to go for, you burn yourself out a good bit, then you have to refresh. And it makes a nice kind of cinematic style of play that I really enjoy. And that's the kind of thing that I stole from Lady Blackbird. That it's really fun. Per the rules of our approach, I have to talk about what I'm less sure about. And there are a couple of things about Hit the Streets, Defend the Block. The first one is, there are people who play Supers games who come in with the expectation from other Supers RPGs that they are going to model physics, that they want to be able to figure out, okay, is my power better than your power? And Hit the Streets, Defend the Block doesn't do that. I don't know if I'm less sure about it as much as there's certain expectations coming into Supers RPGs that may not be met by this game for those people. And I'm okay with that, but I also realize it's a thing where I worry about sticker shock. A person, Supers RPG, I want it to be like Champions. And it's so not Champions. I've played Champions. It's a great game, but this is a different kind of game. Patrick, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I don't think you should worry about that too much. I think you're really clear in the layout for it of what sort of stories you're trying to tell. But I think a lot of superhero systems that do try and broadly cover the everything of superhero stories, they tend to fall into the problem of any game that tries to universally cover too many types of stories, of it just some things get lost in the weeds. And I think Hit the Streets, you have a really strong vision of what story you want to tell, and I think the game's stronger for that.
Thank you. I do too, but then also because it's so kind of focused, it's not really a game you're going to play for a year. I feel like the arc for Hit the Streets, Defend the Block, a character's superpower being, you're going to max out around 7 to 10 sessions. And at that point, you're not so much street level, challenging your character. It becomes pretty difficult. And also, you kind of told a lot of the stories that you're going to. And so there were some conversations I've had recently with people who really love Supers RPGs and are like, well, can I make this my home game? And I'm like, I think you should make it a piece of your home game tapestry. It's a game that you come in and you play a mini series of. And if you want to keep playing in that neighborhood, speed up time a little bit and age your neighborhood, have a few new things introduced, and have some legacy characters that were inspired by your original heroes. But playing Jim Bob the Builder is not something you're going to do over a 4-year period like you could do in, say, Champions or in the hero system or anything where you've got really granulated aspects of your character and a slow campaign level of progression. So there are a couple things there. And then the last thing I'm not sure about is something I realized at Origins. I developed this game and played it in 4 to 6 session stints. And when I sat down at a table and explained the game to 4 amazing players, and we went through character creation, we went through the map creation, we went through the process of creating your rival team, it ate up a lot of the game session. And I know there are people who are super happy with world building being most of the game session, but I want to deliver the goods, to quote unquote. The goods to me are, I want my person to talk in a funny voice and roll dice to resolve outcomes. To me, that became something that I thought about on the way back from Origins. And I realized, hey, there's a solution that I can just borrow from games like Monster Hearts 2, which is playsets. And that's what the stretch goals have been for the Kickstarter so far, is people who I really admire and adore have kind of stepped up to become stretch goal authors. And what they'll do is write a neighborhood that has a set of problems and challenges, and they have a lot of fun coming up with some really interesting rival teams. And that way, it's 2/3 done. And so you come in and you make your character, but you can look at the neighborhood before you do it. And it's really built around the idea of a one-shot or a con, because to me, I want the full boat. But if you just wanted, like, it turns out that, Bob couldn't make it to tonight's session. We're not going to run our main game. Let's do a one-shot of Hit the Streets, Defend the Block. Now I've got something. And I'm really excited to see these playsets come into being. In fact, Sawyer Rankin was the first stretch goal author. His is already, he's already sent me the text. It's so good. It's like Doom Patrol with the serial numbers filed off. Yes.
I love Sawyer, and I love his RPG writing.
Yes, he is so, so talented. And there are a number of others. Mark D.S. Truman and Matt J. Brown have both written up some. And I'm really desperately hoping that we get to the stretch goal where Heidi Schlottman's neighborhood, The Beat, is announced and achieved. So just cross your fingers, guys, because Heidi Schlottman, she's fantastic. She's such a great writer, you guys.
That sounds like fun. Also, the thing that I like about that you said, like an off night from your main supers, it's a great way to build some of the supers that your team works with that play your street level help, and then those characters.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I could super see that.
Yes.
I love campaign structures where you stretch out the life of, like, telling this one group or this one city's story by changing it up into different systems and tell side stories, crossovers, things like that, just to change the tone, change the pacing, and keep everything new and interesting.
Agreed. Now, Patrick, you're going to tell us about the games that you played in June?
Yes. Like Rich, I'm going to steal a little bit from July, just because my June and July have been particularly light. But off Gauntlet, we're finishing up our Blades in the Dark campaign, continuing to lurch slowly towards the ending of our Chronicles of Darkness campaign, which has gone on for 7 years at this point. It will never die.
Undead.
In a Scion 2nd edition game, and then Changeling the Lost PBTA, which may sound familiar since I think we're all in that. On Gauntlet, I finished up the Lowell's run of Things from the Flood that started with Tales from the Loop. I know y'all have talked about that several times. It was amazing.
Yes, let me just jump in to say, so amazing, so amazing, so amazing.
So good. So very good.
Okay, anyways. Project Lycra, which is what I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And then just the start of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition game. I actually heard a lot about it from Darren over our time at Origins, and then Slavic put it up on the calendar, and I jumped in. It's been interesting. It's been really fun so far. And then at Origins as well, I played a couple of games. I played a session of Overlight, which was very fun and has fancy dice, and that's always fun. I played a session of Witch Punks, which is a little like zine PBTA game that's not out yet, but I will bug people on the gauntlet when it comes out because it's so great. Because you're playing witches and punks, and you have to win the Battle of the Bands, and what's not great about that? Anyways. I played a session of Hearts of Wulin and a session of Infinite Galaxies, and Origins was amazing. So the one that I want to talk about more in detail is Project Lycra, which is Jen Kitzman's evolution of Masks: A New Generation by Brendan Conway. What it does is it takes Masks, which is a story about teenage superheroes and the sort of emotional, complicated lives they lead, and it moves it forward into an adult superhero mode. She does that really cleverly, I think, by taking the adult moves from Masks, which are some of the things that you can sort of grow up into or aim towards, and she sets those as the basic moves of Project Lycra, which already puts you in a different sort of mindset, a different emotional space, a different way that you use your superheroing and your fighting to interact with the world. She also takes the shifting labels aspect of Masks, where different emotional pressures can change the way that you view yourself and your role in the world, and she evolves that as well into confidence and trust tracks, sort of the internal measure of how you feel about yourself, and then the public view of how others see you. And those tracks can go up and down, and as they start to fluctuate, they actually not just tell you how to roleplay your character, because if you have a -3 confidence, that gives you some cues as to how you should be playing your character right now, but they also impact all of the basic moves. So if the community around you doesn't trust you, then when you go out to protect them in a superhero battle, they may get in the way, they may get hurt, they may not see your victory as something to celebrate. So those stats are constantly fluctuating, and it's really interesting to see the way that they echo back and forth from mechanics into role-playing and back into mechanics. That was definitely one thing that worked for me. Looking at the game, we've only played a couple of sessions of it so far, but character creation was super smooth and inviting and really tied all of our characters to each other in really interesting ways. Like, Jen just had an instinct for the sort of relationship questions to choose for each playbook. The whole thing from character creation to play is very easy to pick up, especially if you've played any PBTA games, or especially if you're even remotely familiar with Masks. It's just smooth to shift right into it. The playbooks that she's come up with are also really clever. They're not just evolutions of Masks like some of the other ones are. A lot of them are new archetypes or playbooks that I haven't seen people bring forward in superhero material as much. So Jen has a wide encyclopedic knowledge of comics, and that comes through in these playbooks, which are these really focused archetypes of things you don't see as often. The one that called out to me, the one that I'm playing, is appropriately enough, the Focused. But it's that superhero who has like one very specific power that you wouldn't think would be the most amazing thing or the most powerful thing, but just being stuck with that one power, they've worked it from every angle, they've come up with every creative twist on it they can, and they can take their one little power and use it to cover all sorts of different situations. It's characters like Iceman, who can just control ice, but, at this point is basically immortal and can teleport sometimes. It's crazy. Or Dazzler, who just, plays with lights and makes pretty light shows, but can do all sorts of interesting things. Covers things like the Flash or Plastic Man, or anybody who's just got like a quirky side power that you would almost think was a disappointment when you opened your random present box and saw what superpowers you got. But those are the heroes that have found a way to really make it creative and evolve it. And I've never seen someone pick out that particular archetype in superhero stuff before and call it out as a common trope. And all the playbooks are like that. She has found some really fascinating places to go. So there's also teamwork moves. She's very much kept the masks idea and the superhero idea of you're working in a team, and a lot of your dynamics of the way you work together can determine how your fights, how your encounters go. And so there's a whole set of teamwork mechanics, not quite moves in and of themselves, but mechanics that lay on top of the other basic moves. So as you're going through and making your basic moves and fighting in the superhero battle, you're laying these teamwork mechanics on top where one character is setting up the next one to get a little bit into the bad guy's defenses to set up the next one. You sort of go around the group with everybody setting up the next one until you have this pool of points for the final person to spike at the bad guy or the problem situation, and to do something amazing and game changing, not just an incremental, well, we got another punch in, but let's really change the story and move forward because we've all worked together in this sort of spiraling building way that's really collaborative and fun.
That is really cool. I judge a superhero game on teamwork. It's why I like Hit the Streets, and that sounds amazing. That sounds like a really good approach. Be looking at that more seriously.
It's clever. It's one of the most original things that I've seen in the system so far, and it's just it's brilliant. We've used it a couple times and it works really satisfyingly. The format necessitates things I'm less sure about, and I don't feel too bad about this because this is a game still very much in development, and it's just getting out there to play test and see how it goes. So things I'm less sure or curious about, I'm really curious to see whether that confidence and trust track, whether that mechanic really pendulums back and forth the way that it is supposed to, the way that it seems to want to. So far in our particular game, we've seen how much the confidence and trust tracks can go down for everyone into the negatives in an interesting, dramatic way, but I'm still waiting to see if the mechanics help us pick that up and swing into the other way to where the people love us or we have a little self-confidence, and whether that moving back and forth really informs the emotional role play like you would want it to. The other thing I was less sure about is the moves. There are the basic moves that you use for your investigation and fighting and interacting with the world, and then there are your downtime moves that you use to build up your teamwork or work out your personal problems, deal with the parts of your life that don't have to do with supering. And thus far, those downtime moves are super sweet and really appealing, and they've drawn a lot of the play. And the basic moves, quote unquote, have been a little bit lighter. We haven't gone to them as much. They don't have quite the curb appeal draw of the downtime moves. That may mean that some of the basic moves need to be spiced up to match the downtime moves, or maybe the game is more about the downtime moves than the punching supervillains in the face. I'm not sure. But it was just sort of an imbalance that I've noticed so far. But overall, the game is killer, super engaging, super easy to slip into. It's been emotional stories so far. It's been funny stories so far. And it's one of those games where I'm antsy. I can't wait for the next session.
That sounds pretty good. So how many sessions do you think would be ideal with this?
I'm not sure. I'm still looking to see how some of the long-term mechanics of it start to play out. But I could easily see your standard PBTA long campaign of 12 to 15. I could see that no problem.
Awesome.
I have a feeling like it could go a good bit longer, especially if you keep revamping your story and keeping everything fresh in between arcs.
I've just speaking from my experience of running masks, and I feel like the core of Project Lycra sounds like there's a lot of masks DNA in there. I ran a masks game that ran 24 sessions, and it really felt good and fresh when we did kind of a mid-season or a couple of season breaks and reframed things. I think I'm with you that Project Lycra could go. Like, that could be a campaign. You could get some deep play out of it.
So yeah, it's a great game. It's still very much in development. It's not really out there in the world. If you know where to find Jen on social media, I'm sure you could poke her and try and see if she would share things with you or reveal secrets of it. But keep an eye out for it. This game's gonna be cool.
All right. Well, I guess it's my turn. So let's see. In June, off Gauntlet, I played Urban Shadows. I played Changeling the Lost PBTA. I played Trail of Cthulhu and Action Cards, a Fate homebrew that we play that has been going on for 6 years now. It's a pretty good game. And then on Gauntlet, I played Blazons and Things from the Flood. And Origins games, I played Crossroads Carnival, which is still in playtest. But I'm going to be talking about Blazons, which is by Rose Bailey. It's available on drive-thru, and she wrote it for her Patreon. It was run by Rich, I have to admit, because he is the purveyor of all of my superhero drugs, first and foremost, these days. And I should step back for a moment, because this game is kind of a blow-your-mind superheroes game. It's incredibly abstract, and it's meant to run sort of like the Green Lantern Corps. So all of these people with these amazing power manipulation abilities.
Oh, that's amazing. I love Green Lantern comics. Tell me more.
Here's the thing is I only know about it in passing, and literally I remember that I think it was it Scott Snyder was writing Green Lantern, and then he did the Lantern Corps and kept on adding all the colors, and I was like, pfft. And Lowell's like, no, they've done that before. He's like, it should be cool, and I'm like, ugh. Well, it turns out that in fact I'm a fan. I didn't know that until I played the game. So anyway, character creation was very flavorsome. I really enjoyed that. You get in there, you answer some questions about yourself, your philosophies, how you picture your character thinking of themselves, and then they have some ideas of your life before, and one of them you change, like who you were before, how that outlook has changed since you've become this hero. So you've already got this idea of there's you, but what you're doing, these responsibilities that you've taken on, have changed you. Right away, that was very intriguing. The powers and the description of the system was incredibly abstract. And at first, and I will come back when I say what I'm less sure about, but once I kind of started to get it, I'm like, whoa, this is super powerful. This literally can do, I have a ring that lets me do blah. Okay? And it delivers on that. It has that sort of, there's limits on it, there's definitions on it, but they aren't these big, picky, long champions ones where you have to have studied the system with the grognards in order to stand shoulder to shoulder with other people. It's abstracted in the full, correct, well-defined way. Actually got a chance of making something work the way you want it to. And I know it was good because literally after we started playing, I was like, oh my gosh, I really want to play a Green Lantern game. What happened, though, was we hit it and we had some delays. And I think as we were working on it, we forgot a very core mechanic, which was that your skills define which powers you have. And because there were just 2 players, we were using like all of the different powers. But what we did is we limited them by what bonuses we could add to them and things like that. It ended up working out. We weren't too overpowered, but we would have been if there had been more than 2 of us. So we missed a thing, and that added some confusion to us. We would have understood, I think, what was going on better if we hadn't missed that little moment. Because they were abstract, we did have to have some conversations about it. I mean, even about midway through the session thing, we mostly had it down. So it wasn't crazy. It did take a bit, though, to get a little bit like, okay, what are the bounds of these things? It is hard for me to describe, but the game is, you have powers like protect, defend, strike, very simple ones that can do some things. They're all of the same power level. I mean, it's really just changing the math of different things that occur. So it's all very well balanced. You don't have to worry about someone having some gooby power that's going to take over the game. But you need a lot more points than you get as a character starting out to do all the things. You're going to be able to do 2 or 3 things, which is perfect for Green Lantern Corps, right? For the Lantern Corps. You've got a ring and you can only do a set. If you had a group doing it, that would be great because you very much have your roles defined by what skills and powers you've bought. So I'd say almost in retrospect, even with us kludging it up, we still had a really good time. It gave me that taste that went, oh my God, this is a game I wanted, and I didn't believe it. I mean, I didn't even think that would be the thing. And it really felt like if you had 4 people and you did it rules as written, it would be a game where the teamwork was literally in the mechanics. In order to complete a situation, you have to have the other people bringing their skills in. You simply don't have enough points or powers or flexibility to take care of a situation yourself completely if they're of any difficulty at all. So it's sort of one of those things that is, for teamwork, it's a mechanical teamwork thing that's really cool. And the characters are delicious. I mean, they give you just those pieces that you need so that you have a strong sense of what you're doing and why you're doing it. It was pretty good. I would love to come back at it with a few more fellow players and my head screwed on straight and it not being 110 in my my office when I'm playing. And I think it would all be good. I really enjoyed it. So that was Blazons by Rose Bailey, and you can get it at drive-thru, or you can check out her Patreon.
How cool. I hadn't heard anything about this. I love Green Lantern stuff. I love Rose Bailey. I've liked her work for a long time, so this is perfect. I'm going to go find this.
Hello, listeners. Jason here. You know, we put a lot of care into the Gauntlet family of podcasts because we want you to be entertained and we want you to engage with these games that we love. And listening to us talk about role-playing games is great. Reading blog posts about role-playing games is great. Interacting on forums about role-playing games, such as the Gauntlet forums, that is also great. But in my opinion, nothing compares to actually playing tabletop role-playing games. And with that in mind, I want to invite you to check out our $8 Hangouts Friend Patreon tier. The Hangouts Friend tier gets you early RSVP access to new games posted on Gauntlet Hangouts, our amazing online gaming calendar, where we organize and run nearly 200 sessions per month. It is the absolute best way to get involved with the Gauntlet community, experience our awesome play culture, and importantly, play some role-playing games. We have done everything we can to make Gauntlet Hangouts as flexible and accessible as possible, and we have been successful. Over the last 2 years, we have organized 2,498 game sessions. The $8 tier also gets you access to new issues of our fantastic magazine Codex, where we publish all kinds of original games and supplements, as well as access to our Slack group, which is the heart of our community. It is a truly fantastic deal, and even if you only played in 1 or 2 games a month, it would be the best value in all of role-playing games. And not only do you get all the benefits I've mentioned here, but you also help support great podcasts like this one. So please head over to patreon.com/gauntlet and check it out. Thanks.
We decided that for our second segment, we usually have one of us just talk on about something, but we all ended up at Origins this year. So we thought that we would talk about Origins and, well, conventions in general. But in case you don't know, Origins is a gaming convention that takes place in Columbus, Ohio, always in June. It is pretty sweet. Let's start out with first, for each of you, what was a good thing about Origins? Rich, you want to start us off?
Well, good things for Origins were pretty numerous. I would say the first thing was that I drove from Minnesota all the way across Chicago and came to South Bend, Indiana, and got to hang out with Lowell and Sherri before the con began. And then we did a 4-hour drive from South Bend to Columbus, and that was really fun. And I got to meet Tyler and Patrick and Darren, and Jen Kitzman, author of Project Lycra, was there, and there were a number of folks at the Games on Demand. So my one good thing is I got to see a bunch of Gauntlet folks and friends and Gauntlet friends and lots of other new folks that I got to meet, primarily at Games on Demand. That's my one big good thing, is all the people that frequent Origins.
Patrick?
I will say for Origins in particular, I've been to some other conventions, and while Origins is certainly very large and there are a lot of people there, it's not like the wall-to-wall packed that I've been in a lot of conventions before. It's a really huge convention center, so they have a lot of room to sprawl out in. It means some extra walking, but I think it was a fair trade-off for not being shoulder to shoulder just for 12 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. It is a convention where the amenities are supreme. There's actually good food accessible around there. The restaurants in the hotels are good. The restaurants around the hotels are good. And there's the North Market, which has all kinds of different offerings and a sort of, I wouldn't call it a farmer's market venue, but a sort of shishi artisanal market approach. And it was, and that is very nice. But the other good thing that's about Origins is that it tends to actually sync up with the Columbus Gay Pride Parade. And so it is all kinds of people who are in town for a special celebration. And it is super fun. It's like twice the celebration that's going on everywhere you go.
And the city goes all out for Pride. It was really nice to see.
It did, yeah.
The Pride Parade is pretty massive.
It goes on for a long time, and it's so well attended, and so many floats and groups going by, and the sidewalks are packed with people clapping and cheering. It's just really fun. So now I'm going to say, what was really, really awesome for you in particular with this last Origins? Something that stands out for you.
Okay, my answer is really selfish. I'll just own that it's a little selfish. But Star Wars Saturdays is a living campaign series I've been running for the Gauntlet for a year and a half, pushing towards 2 years now. I think at what point, kind of like when you're a kid, at what point can you round up to say that it's 2 years? I don't know. Is that 2/3? Is that 3/4? Patrick, can you make a call on that one?
I'm pretty sure there's some sort of equation, but I don't have it in front of me.
All right. Well, we'll parking lot that. So I've been running that for a while, and one of the things I do with Star Wars Saturdays, every month I run a different RPG set in Star Wars, and Mark D.S. Truman wrote this game called Cartel, and I thought, wow, Cartel, Hut Cartel, peanut butter chocolate, let's do it. And so I'd run Hut Cartel a few times for the Star Wars Saturdays crew, and it was really, really fun. And as I was thinking about what games I was going to GM at Origins, I said, hey, Mark D.S. Truman, can I run this game? This is a bastardization of your really thoughtful game, but has Star Wars and pew pew. And Mark D.S. Truman is a wonderful person. He said, yes, I generally prefer people to run games as written, but I know folks really like Star Wars, and yes, they do. And I got to run it. I ran Hit the Streets, Defend the Block, and then one GM at Games on Demand. One of the things you get if you run enough games at Games on Demand is you get a Jump the Line ticket where you can kind of jump ahead of people to get to play a game that you really like. And I had 2 different GMs jump line to quote unquote make me demand that I run Hut Cartel. And Mad J, he played, he took pictures, he posted on Twitter. There was this low amount of buzz, and it was just so exciting to see people get excited about this little hack of a game, which I very openly admit, not one word of it is mine. It's all Mark D.S. Truman's, except where it was Spanish words I found and replaced with Star Warsy words, but this is his design, and it was really, really fun. And there's a person who actually wants to run it for their home group, and Mad J's running in Kansas City, so it's kind of neat to see it bubble up a little bit like this fun little thing. So there's my selfish, awesome moment at Origins.
I saw people when they were playing it, and they were super enjoying themselves, so
yeah,
it looked like a lot of fun. So, Patrick?
Yeah, so for me, for this Origins in particular, I'm going to mirror some of what Rich said earlier. It was so cool to meet so many Gauntleteers in real life, friends that I've been playing various levels of games from just a couple over the past couple of years to all the time with, but I've never seen the side or back of their heads or anything from the shoulders down, and it's amazing. You all have 3 dimensions. You have bodies and personalities and existence, and it was so fun to meet people in person. But also, separate from the Gauntlet, just pure Origins experience. I did play a session of a game I mentioned earlier called Witch Punks. It was amazing. It was like a super stripped down PBTA zine that was put together and collaged, and it was beautiful. And this was like one of the first games of it that our particular GM, who is also co-writing and designing for it, had run. The two people that I'd played with had never played PBTA before, and the whole session was just an insanely fun amount of collaboration and on-the-spot storytelling, and it was just complete strangers that I met at Origin, and it felt like the best of Gauntlet games. And it was, so excited.
I kind of have to go with the same theme almost. It was meeting people that I've only met in passing or that I've really only read what they've written. I got to spend some time talking with Kate Bullock. I got to play her game Crossroads Carnival. It was wonderful. She's a person who is careful and earnest in the way that she writes, but in person, she's careful and earnest and warm and generous. And it is so nice to have those other dimensions that you can never pick up the extent that they exist until you're with that person. And it was just a sort of, this Origins for me was one where I got to sit down and end up having some real conversations with people that have always been sort of moving around in my periphery. And it was just kind of lovely. It was the most human and person-to-person Origins for me in some ways. And that was super nice. And it is the good thing about conventions is you can get together with other people and have that chance to have a conversation and connect and get a sense of who they are. And maybe you've only read their stuff or seen them on Twitter or something like that. And it is a chance to do that, which is lovely. What were you less sure about? What happened that you were like, ugh, only at a convention?
This is a little inside baseball. But I've been participating in games on demand at Origins for a few years now. And this year, I felt, I don't know what happened, but I felt like games on demand was either slided or something slid through the cracks. I think it's more like slided. Like I have this feeling that Origins doesn't value games on demand as much as it would value, say, an Adventures League or a Pathfinder, because the number of GM passes for people who ran that was reduced, and there were promises made for particular types of tables that would happen within the games on demand room that would have helped me as a person who, like, when you get in a room that loud, I really have trouble parsing out when individuals are speaking, and having tighter tables would have really helped me. And that was supposed to be a thing that we'd have. And no, they're these giganto, like the size of a football table where I have to scream across, and I was like having to pace around to be able to hear people. And just like there's little niggly things. I had to buy my own ticket. Like, that's the worst, right? I'm a terrible person, but like, I just felt games on demand was less valued this year. And it hurt my feelings a little bit, because I feel like we're really good and giving and worthwhile members of the convention. And I guess it's a little bit of a reality check that, like, yeah, there was only 3 people at this game of Starcrossed, and that table could have had 8 people playing Pathfinder who would all be paying the same number of tickets, and therefore it's more valuable for Origins to have these other games. And, like, what's our place in this environment within the convention? How do we make sure that we matter enough to be a priority for the convention? So that was the less sure about for me. I'm sorry, it's a little inside baseball, but I literally go to Origins to hang out with friends, go to the dealer's room, and go to games on demand. So dealer's room was great, but like most of my other time was there. So that's why I kind of obsess about that inside baseball. That's my thing.
Yeah, and if you're unfamiliar with Games on Demand, it's a group of volunteers who put together, they secure rooms at a convention, and they have GMs come in and run their indie and small press RPG games that they want to run, and they offer those on a menu to players who can just come at that time and, essentially spend a couple of tokens for the convention and play a game. And there's a sort of random draw that goes with it. So, and it's a thing it's a very volunteer, low overhead organization that does this at Origins and Gen Con and other conventions around there. You see, there seems to be more of them popping up. But it's a great place to try new games. It's a great place to try new GMs. And it's a great place to meet other players who have the same kinds of interests as you do. So if you're at a convention and you see there's games on demand, go ahead and give it a try. Because at the very least, you'll meet other players who are interested in trying something a little different. And Patrick, I'm going to ask you, was there something that you were less sure about?
So with Origins in particular, it is, we should say, very much devoted to board games and board gaming. The role-playing aspect is definitely secondary, and especially if you cut out D&D, Pathfinder, and Shadowrun, that cuts out a good 80% of the scheduled role-playing offerings. There are bright, shining havens. There's the Games on Demand room, which was beautiful, and I definitely plan on doing more of that next year. And there were a couple of cool small press or indie type games that I could find, but if Gauntlet-style role-playing is your draw and your main pull to a convention, Origins is sort of up in the air whether it's the best one for you to go to. You'll find some great places to go game, but if you're wanting to see people and companies presenting the best of their role-playing stuff, Origins isn't exactly where they come for it.
And probably where you are going to see that in a convention is probably a little bit more West Coasty in some ways, or at least West. And mind you, I'm not the person to ask about other conventions because I stick pretty much to Midwest conventions. So let's see. And what was I less sure about this time? I'm going to agree with you that Games on Demand definitely got less than they asked for, and they went to a lot of trouble to prove that they could deliver. But I have the impression that the convention organizers were going through some transitions, and a lot of people got short shrift. I think the other thing that I am less sure about is that there are lots of times when I get together with lots of other gamers and I realize how spoiled I am. And sometimes I feel bad that I'm there and I'm picky and I have all of these fine things, and there's people that they're like, oh my God, this is the only time I get to play these games. This is so exciting. And I feel for them, and I'm like, go call on the gauntlet, those kinds of things, do that stuff. But there's another part of me that goes, geez, I should be giving my ticket away to someone else. I literally feel guilty half of the time when I'm there. But that is my own problem. I should see a therapist. So what, if you go to Origins, will you do differently next year, Patrick?
If I go back to Origins next year or in the future, I definitely want to carve out more time for Games on Demand. Games on Demand is a very loud, chaotic situation in a room full of a lot of strangers. So I was a bit hesitant to get into it this year, since those are all things that sort of get to me. But having sat back and sort of observed it from the background, and I played in a couple sessions of it, it was super fun. And I will definitely carve out more time for Games on Demand and make sure that the other convention things that I'm doing line up smoothly with the particular slots that Games on Demand is in. Because I was in sort of a chaotic, I'm running from this end of the convention to the center to the other, and I missed out on a lot of things that I would definitely do next year.
That makes sense. So what would I do differently next year? I would make sure that my shoes were broken in before I go.
Oh.
Oof.
Because I started my day out with a fine set of blisters on the back of my heels, and then ended up spending the rest of the convention trying to minimize the amount of walking I did, which is kind of a bummer. I didn't go to the dealer's hall at all because it was like, no, not going to do it. And it made me pretty pouty by the end of it. Is just, I didn't really want to walk any kind of distance to go to a meal. And mind you, I didn't have to. I could have lovely things very close to me, but it just meant that I was a big poop about going anywhere. I was like, no, you guys go ahead, and so it's that kind of thing of just the simple things. Make sure that what you're wearing is comfortable, broken in. Don't try to do anything fancy. I mean, there's a lot of big stretches between things, so prepare for that if you can. If you have any kind of accessibility problems or something like that, try to prepare, try to get folks around you that can help you out with that. No one can help me out with my heel blisters because that was just pure stupidity on my part. And I'm going to tell you one true thing about attending conventions that this year's Origins experience really drove home for you.
In the month or two leading up to Origins, while we were getting ready, getting prepared to go, Tyler obsessed a lot about what our particular route was going to be and what our hotel looked like and where we were going to be and what our schedules were going to be like and where we were going to go eat and how to get from here to there and having all of like parking tickets lined up and just everything micromanaged and laid out. And I mercilessly made fun of him the entire time about how paranoid he was being. And then we got there, and Origins was huge, and it was overwhelming, and there was a lot of people and a lot of stuff going on, and I did not have to think about the logistics of any of it, because Tyler had laid everything out, planned everything down to the minute, and in the moment, having that sort of preparation where I knew what my schedule was, I knew that certain things were taken care of. I knew where to go for this sort of thing. I knew when we were going to be meeting people. It was really comforting to have all of that sort of like concrete plan laid out so that then I could skip things or improvise or reshuffle as needed, but all the basics were laid out, and it was all because Tyler is amazing.
He is amazing. I'll agree with you on that.
Yeah, here.
So I say one thing for me is most people sabotage themselves at conventions. And sometimes, if they're really good at it, they sabotage someone else's experience. I think if you're going to a convention, particularly if you're going with someone who is going to go with you and play games with you, you need to really get yourself together. You need to understand that you have someone who's there with you who shares your hobby, and that's rare, and you are incredibly lucky. And you need to give as good as you get. I saw 3 particularly unpleasant little situations where people's snobbery kept them from letting their friend enjoy a game they wanted to enjoy, where someone having their sense of the schedule off meant that they literally pulled the other person off of a game that they were all set to play. Just sort of these weird temper tantrums that come from not realizing that it's not just their version of how things ought to go that's in play at a convention, that the person that they're with should have freedom of choice, should have some options, should get some consideration. I mean, particularly when it's your girlfriend or your spouse or your, significant other, and they're doing that hobby with you. For God's sake, don't burn their experiences. Let them, if they want to try a game that you seriously do not want to play, take a deep breath and say, you go ahead and play it. I'm going to try something else, but please do what you want to. No, we're not going to do that. Oh my gosh. So I hope that when you go to the convention, you can be your best self, but I particularly hope that you can be your best self if you're there with someone else. And I try to be that with my spouse, and everyone has some problems every once in a while, but you want to really watch it, particularly when you're in that situation where you're going and you're making choices together about games or about play, is try gracious. All right, that was it. That was kind of a downer one. I'm really sorry, but it was just the worst things I saw at Origins were people self-sabotaging.
Yeah, no, it's something that needs to be said, and, something as simple as not getting enough sleep or not eating on time, if you let that sort of stuff spiral out of control and you don't check yourself, can ruin not just your time, but everybody's day.
Yep.
Sherri, I'm really glad that you said, we talked a little bit about some of the things you witnessed, and it's important to think about that. I remember when I just pined to date a girl who would play these stupid games with me, and now I'm married to one, and it's just wonderful. And the thought of being a butt to my wife when it comes to gaming is just abhorrent. It makes me sick, and you got to be cognizant of it. There's a lot going on, and Origins and conventions can be busy.
It is, and the thing is just because you have a really strong sense of what's good doesn't mean that the person that you're with has developed that same sense. And personally, some of the best gaming experiences I've had are bad games, sitting there with my husband and us both playing through a terrible game, because we have the best conversations afterwards. I mean, you learn a lot from it, and yeah, you lost 4 hours of possible enjoyment to 4 hours of wow. But that wow really digs a ditch through your psyche, and you learn a lot from it, and it's pretty good for a lot of jokes afterwards. And it's not like that's going to be all of your experiences. So try it. Be gracious, particularly when you have a friend or a significant other who wants to enjoy your hobby with you. That's all I can say. That means that now it's time for Giving Me Life. So this is where we each talk about something not necessarily related to RPGs that's lately inspiring us or filling us with joy. Now, I'm first on the list, so I'm going to tell you that right now, a couple days ago, we got Dragon Quest Builders 2 in the mail. And I popped that in and started playing. It's Minecraft with a little story that goes along with it. It's done by the people who do Dragon Quest, which is a Japanese JRPG. It's a old school JRPG, and that Dragon Quest game is not like my favorite of the RPGs, but Dragon Quest Builders is a thing of beauty. The controls are perfect. The gameplay is mellow, but interesting, intriguing. You're always adding new abilities. You're got little quests. It's like a big list of things to do, but a lovely world to run around and find the ways to do it in. It is a tour with some activities, but it is frictionless. You just play it, and if nothing interrupts you, you can go on forever because it is that joyful and colorful and non-frustrating, but a little bit challenging. Just a little bit. Perfect for a long day after work. That's me, Patrick.
Yeah, so Giving Me Life right now is Die, the comic, and the role-playing game. The comic is by Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans. It's put out by Image Comics. The first trade paperback of it just came out, so the first of, I think, 4 planned story arcs for it. It is amazing. It's the high level sort of quick pitch of it is that it's goth Jumanji. It's these people who played role-playing games together as kids, getting back together as adults and being sucked into a real-world version of the games that they played as kids, how they navigate that world, and how they get out of it. It's a really fascinating dive into a lifetime devoted to role-playing. It comments on the parts of ourselves that we develop because of role-playing games and the community around it, and the parts of ourselves in our lives that we give up because of our devotion to a hobby, and the impacts, good and bad, of investing so much of your imaginative and emotional life into something so ephemeral and unreproducible. It's a brilliant comic, and to top it all off, after the first trade came out, he put out for free online, Kieran Gillen put out for free online the role-playing game version of Die, which is at the moment a nice, simple sort of system that he's hanging a really interesting scenario on top of. And him coming at it from the aspect of a story writer rather than coming at it from the aspect of a professional game developer means that a lot of the book, so much of the text of it, is almost mechanized tools for how to tell and develop a story on the fly. The actual mechanics of the game are limited to maybe like the back third of the book. And the first 2/3 of the book is all of this advice on different ways to branch stories, to pull thematic and visual elements out of your players and put them back into the world and have them face off against their own emotional insecurities, against their own fears, against the things that they've already flagged to you as being interesting themes that they want to engage with. And it's sort of a mind-blowing approach to writing a game, just in that I haven't seen it before. It's so centered on finding and telling a compelling narrative and all the different tricks and side paths you can take along that narrative. It's beautiful. I think anybody should go read it just to see the GMing and storytelling advice that's in it. But also, I think it seems like a really cool game. It's a great way to play out a lot of the themes of the comic, and I want to inflict this sad majesty on people I love very soon.
Yay! Rich?
My giving me life is super mundane. I just want to talk about gaming.
No, it's the best.
Okay, I have now, at the end of June, beginning of July, moved into the burbs from my downtown apartment to the burbs where my wife and son and I are now living in a townhome. It is, if I were to drive to work, because I still work downtown, would be a 45-plus minute drive. But there's a park and ride, which is where you go and you park and you ride the bus. And I can make the trip in the express bus, which gets to like literally drive on the side of the road. They're authorized to drive like the Dukes of Hazzard or something. It's insane. And I just sit in the back and I read, and I just talk to my son like, "Hey, bud, do you mind if next week I take the Switch with me to work?" "Oh, sure, Dad, I'm playing Xbox. Let's go for it." So now I'm going to take the Switch with me to work, and just for the bus. And I don't know, riding the bus is super interesting. And there's so many interesting people on the bus, and like watching them as they cope with their own days and how they've managed their existence because they've done this way longer than I have. It's fascinating, and I really enjoy riding the bus to work.
That is the coolest giving me life ever. All right.
No, I think David has much. Like, he did this hot dog thing from way back in the day. It's the best.
Okay. So, and listeners, that's our show. If you want to get in touch with us at The Gauntlet, you can find us on Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. If you want to find out what we're up to, all of the different facets that we try to make open to our readers and our listeners, just go to gauntletrpg.com to see our blog and website as well. If you want to get in on the action, you can find us at patreon.com/gauntlet. If you check out the Patreon for a very small amount, a monthly amount, you can get our monthly zine, The Codex. It is a lovely creation. I want to thank you for joining us, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.